Question Everything was born out of a desire for curiosity, a love for people's stories, and a deep belief that through open and honest conversations, freedom can be found. Freedom from shame, from judgment, and from fear. So let's talk about the stuff we've been hiding from. Let's say the things we were told not to say. And let's ask the questions we've been wanting to ask, but have been too scared to. Because when we question everything, everything changes. Let's go. Welcome to episode 3 of Question Everything. So I feel like my opening is going to be, I am so excited for today's episode because that's always going to be the case, because the joy of connecting with people that you want to connect with and putting it out on a public platform and sharing stories is fun. So I'm always going to be excited. So today I am here with Eli Pagel, and he was somebody that when I was dreaming up this project, I knew I had to have him on the show, because what I'm trying to create here, this platform, these engagements, these conversations, was exactly what we did almost 16 years ago when we met. We met when we were at Amateur Softball Association, USA Softball for Work, and on paper, two totally different people. We both came in with some preconceived ideas of who the other one is. We talk about that sense of the judgment that we thought the other was going to have and how that could have created a really big barrier. But despite us being totally different on paper, us along with our friend Julie, who is still a dear friend of mine, we would have these conversations. We call them lunch bunch, right? We grab our lunches, we've got to the stadium, we're still in the grass, and we just talk about things. We talk about religion and relationships, and with a curiosity, right, of people that look different than us, that maybe have different beliefs, but understanding that we were more than that persona that we were actually bringing to the table. And so this conversation was so great. Like I said, it felt like it did 16 years ago, except we're a little wiser and also not at all. But we talk about kind of this identity, our identity piece that we can hold so strongly to that really stops us from the connection. We talk about kind of those, and also along with that, the personas that we really can leave behind and connect human to human and how impactful that can be. And really, I love that, we talked about, what he questioned, right? And how when he started to question one thing in his life, he realized that he could question other things for the better, right? To know. And, I'm just so grateful for him sharing this time with me and all the time before, because I think for both of us, it allowed us to have the tools and the experience to have these meaningful conversations with people that we may not, agree with, that may be different than us, and really learn and come from a place of curiosity. So I hope you enjoy our conversation, and let's go. Good morning, Eli.
Good morning, Holly. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
Good, very good.
I love that we're scheduled this during our lunch hour, because as we'll share, we used to have something called lunch bunch. So it feels very fitting. I think we should have had our PB&Js or whatever it was we ate back in the day.
Right. What, ramen noodles and the things that we could
Yeah.
hand back then.
I know, I was like, what did I eat back then? Probably cottage cheese. A lot of cottage cheese back in the day. Thank you for joining me. I, introduced you a little in the intro, and I think, just wanted to share. I appreciate you. You got in a message. We've kept in touch. We've known each other. Oh my gosh, it's been like 15 years now.
Wow.
And kind of said, hey, I hope that I built enough trust with you to ask you this question, but do you want to come on my show and talk about our biases, our perceptions, and how we came together as probably two different people 15 years ago, totally different on paper, but I found a friendship. And you were like, yeah, let's do it. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. I was excited that you reached out, because it's one of those things, like when you come from such different places that we really did back then.
Yeah.
You never really know kind of, okay, how did my impact, what kind of impact did I have on that person? What kind of relationship were we able to have? And so it was cool that you were able to reach out, and I was honored by that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was when I had this like inkling of what this looks like, you really were one of the first people I wanted to reach out to, because I think that what we were able to do, 15 years ago on paper, two totally different people, different perspectives, biases, whatever we want to call them, it was able to come together, is kind of what I want this show to be about. And so I love that we're able to kind of look back, see how it shifted us, and kind of just have this conversation in a meaningful way.
Yeah, for sure. Because you mentioned lunch bunch from years and years ago. We talked about, it's really kind of the punchline of a joke. It's, for lack of a better term, it's, a lesbian, a Catholic, and a minister walk into a sandwich shop, and the joke kind of writes itself at that point.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
Right. What could possibly go wrong? So that's that's what it was. It was, there was three of us back then showing up and doing exactly what we're doing here, asking questions, getting each other's perspective, and kind of just sorting the world out, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, we worked together, the Amateur Softball Association. I think, I started in 2005. Was that when you started, about 2006?
So I was there the summer of 06,
Okay.
part-time, and then a full-time in 07.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess we started working together in 06. So tell me, and I'll share too, what was your, who was Eli in summer of 2006? Like, because I'm sure you're different now. Like, how would you identify yourself in that time?
Yeah, so back then I was fresh out of college, and I had just graduated with a degree from a Christian college, and it was a degree in specialized ministry, youth and family ministry. So my whole kind of worldview and even like job outlook was focused around kind of church ministry kind of stuff. And so naturally I got a job at the softball field. And
obviously, the next step.
So really that was what, I'd studied for the last 4 years, and been studying the Bible and studying ministry and studying church and those kind of things. So that's really where my head was at. I was a kid fresh out of college with all his wonderful ideas about how the world should be from this very specific worldview. And so that's where I was in 2007 coming out of that. And not to mention, I was from small town Oklahoma, where there wasn't a lot of diversity. There wasn't a lot of, different people around. This was really sort of on the front end of all the Facebook and social media, to where you could connect with different types of people. And so we just I didn't have a real big circle of different kinds of people in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were married to your lovely wife, Kendra, at the time, right? Or were you engaged, or were you married when you
were, let's see, 06. So we got married in 06.
Okay.
Our senior year of college, we were married. So yeah, newlywed, and all that goes with that, trying to figure life out in that stage as well.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I'll share, because I kind of came in, this was, I think, for both of us, kind of our first real jobs, right? And so I came in, recent transplant to Oklahoma, had kind of come out maybe 2 years before. So relatively, like, almost like now that I think about it, like a baby deer, like not super comfortable, like still very tender maybe around that. And so, I'd met Katie, my wife now, when I moved there, but that relationship was new. And, I had so yeah, trying to figure out my own way, right? Like, first time on my own, first job, new relationship, and, coming into a place too where, meeting you, and I had a lot of fear and doubt. Oh my gosh, what's the word? Suspectful? What's the word?
Right.
I was suspicious. There we go. Very suspicious of religion, right? That was like a very big, like, I would kind of clamp down. I was like, and so I think that's kind of maybe where we both came in with this idea of who the other person was going to be.
Right. Yeah.
For me, at least.
No, absolutely. I mean, I had all these preconceived notions and all the things that and honestly, I mean, I had never interacted in a meaningful way other than from afar, or a news story, or some, scholarly learning. I'd never interacted with the LGBTQ community,
right,
in a meaningful way, especially on a personal level.
And
some of that was just never had opportunity, and some of it was, it just wasn't in my circles that I was running in. I hope I wasn't like intentionally exclusionary, but I wasn't intentional about reaching to those communities either.
Right.
So so it's kind of my first experience. It's like, okay, what's this going to be like? Of course, when you're hearing and reading things from afar, you tend to get the negative aspects, and it's like, okay, am I this person going to be that way? And so it's just kind of a learning experience for me, and very eye-opening in a good way.
Yeah. Well, tell me, and I'll share first, just make it a little less uncomfortable. What was maybe when you kind of came in, you're like, oh, interesting, lesbian, what was maybe your perception of who I would be, and how was that, what was, yeah, maybe just in there, what was the kind of the perception of who I would be based off of maybe your perception of what that identifier means?
Yeah. I think the funny thing is that we probably both groups, where I was coming from and where you were coming from.
Yeah.
My hunch was like, this person's just automatically not going to like me. Like,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
like because of
Right
who
there.
I am and what
Yeah.
I represent, like they're not going to like me. And so we're instantly going to have this kind of gap that we're going to have to bridge. And we may or may not be able to bridge that. And so,
Yeah.
I'm a people pleaser. I love for people to like me. And so just the thought of that person not liking me was a little scary, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, right? Because it was almost like I was like, he's not gonna like me. You're like, she's not gonna like me. So it's almost like two blocks of barriers, right? It's like it's not just one. It's like, oh crap, we're like way far apart on this. And then like for like a defense mechanism too, right? An assumption that like, do I even need to be friends with this person if there's just going to be judgment, or if there's going to be like, is there any way for us to bridge that gap?
Right, absolutely. And so I think, credit to both of us that we
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, I'm going to let my wall down and I'm going to risk, potentially being hurt here to see if we can bridge that gap. And I think that's the only way that we're able to overcome some of those preconceived notions is, hey, vulnerability, and kind of open up a little bit.
Right. What do you think, what was it? What do you think was different for us then? Because like again, we were like young too, right? Like that was, we don't know how, like the emotional IQ probably we didn't, I think maybe we have that just naturally, just our paths and all that. But like, what do you think worked for us? I'm curious.
We had a common enemy in our bosses. We both were fighting against them. So
that's true. It always helps to take somebody down, right?
Right. We're both fighting the power together.
2 hour, 2 a.m. press box activities, that does help.
I think that's part of it is come to a place where it's like, look, to some degree, we've got a job to do. We're both on the same team.
Yeah.
Regardless of our beliefs or personal preferences, whatever, for the sometimes 16 hours a day that we spent together, like we're on the same team. There's no reason for us to be miserable and make everyone else around. Let's have fun. Let's enjoy what we're doing, enjoy one another. We clearly have some common interests because we're both at the same job. Different roles, but we're both working for the same company.
Right.
So clearly there's some, alignment there. Let's feed into that. And I think generally we both like to have fun while we were working. And so being goofy in the press box kind of allowed us to break down some of those walls and realize, they're really just kind of a goofball like I am.
Right. I love that too, because it was like that. And that's probably, looking back how that started, right? You're like sitting there like, oh, we have a similar sense of humor, or hey, we both like watched that show, or hey, but we both caught the same thing. You're like, oh, that's like, and then it's like broaching, okay, well, and I don't ever remember having like specific conversations around either like, I mean, we had a lot of religion conversation, right? Because Julie, who we'll have to do another one of these, include Julie. She's Catholic, and so we were like asking you a lot of questions, but I don't ever remember it getting personal around either of those topics.
No, there was such a mutual respect for the other person, and a genuine. It wasn't an inquisition. It was inquisitive.
Ooh, that's good.
Weren't questioning who the person was or questioning the validity even of what they were. Just like, hey, like we're obviously coming from different places. Help me understand your perspective. Help me understand this. Okay, this thing's kind of weird about what you believe or your lifestyle or Julie's faith or so it's like just help us understand those things. And I think that's beneficial to everybody in that kind of setting.
Oh, I love that word. Like it's inquisitive over inquisition, right? It's like this like little bit of a speech change that like changes everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, it was just, I can remember those lunches, and just, it was just like those times where you have questions. You always, like, when you meet new people and you meet different people, you always have
Hmm.
questions, but sometimes you don't feel comfortable asking them.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
we were comfortable asking each other those questions in kind of a safe
Hmm.
area where it's like, hey, they're not gonna cast me aside because of this question.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we're going to go back to work. We're going to be colleagues. We're going to be friends. We're going to, we're still going to be the same people, but I've always had this question. Let me ask
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I love that because you kind of build that trust equity, right? Like I had a friend at work, she was always great. She's like, you build up equity at work with your bosses, with your people. So if you make a mistake, you have all this equity to like take out of, right? Like you're like, okay,
Right.
I may say something that's not worded the correct way, or maybe I say something and you felt a little bit judged, but you're like, okay, that's not her intention. She
Yeah.
didn't, that's like not her heart, right? Or vice versa, right? So that's, but I'm curious, like what, and maybe in other situations, because I think a benefit for us is that we had, this very, very unique work environment. We had hours together. We built in this trust. Like, how do we do this in a way when you don't have hours upon hours to like build a trust or to get to know somebody? Like, have you seen that in your life, a way to do that? Does that make sense? It's a
Yeah.
very
Yeah. I think the biggest
one.
thing, and honestly, I learned it from our time there, because, yeah, we had lots of time together, but then there were
Mhm.
other people that were, from different walks of life, or came from different places, or came from all over the country. And so
Mhm.
really for me, it became like, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like,
Mm.
I'm going to start by extending trust. And until they
Mhm.
break that trust, I'm going to extend trust. Like, I'm going to
Mhm.
start from that place. I think so many times we start from a place of distrust. Like,
Mhm.
like you and I could have done that with each other. We could have said,
Mhm.
he's not going to like me, she's not going to like me. And so instantly I'm going to distrust that.
Right.
Whereas we just kind of said, hey, I'm just going to trust this person. And again, it goes back to that vulnerability, because when you extend trust and someone
Yeah.
breaks trust, that's painful. Uh,
Mhm.
and so you just have to, and as I've grown and matured, it's become easier, because I realize my own emotional intelligence allows me to handle that hurt better
Mm. Mhm.
uh, than to start from a place of distrust
Yeah.
and navigate that.
Right. It's interesting, right? Because then if we would have, let's say we would have, and I love that you said like the benefit of the doubt, right? That cost us nothing to just give somebody, you see somebody, just give a homeless person, you're like, I'm just gonna give the benefit that like shit went really bad, like right, or not that they're just like wanting or whatever. That's an extreme, thing, but because we both could have gone in it, chose distrust, right? And so then we would just reaffirm probably the other one's belief about ourselves, right? And then you have your mind reaffirms it, and like I knew all Christians were like that, I knew like gay people were like that, like I just knew it, but we didn't, right? We're like, okay, I'm going to choose trust, I'm going to choose curiosity,
Yeah.
and kind of see where this goes.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of it is too, is realizing, like, we are in this human experience together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're both navigating this thing where,
Yeah.
when we really think about it, there's a lot more we don't know than we do know. And
Mm-hmm.
so for us to kind of stake our claim on the little pieces we do know is to me, it's often disingenuous to
Mm-hmm.
do that. And so for me to just approach it from a place of like, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and tell me, like as a, how much did you at that time you come in? How much did you think you knew at that time, at that
Oh,
age?
I thought I knew a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
had just graduated, was actually valedictorian of my college class.
Oh,
But
fancy.
yeah, got a nice little medal for it and everything. So I thought I was real smart. I honestly,
Yeah.
and I probably acted that way sometimes.
Mm.
Uh, but it was through that process of learning and kind of broadening my
Mhm.
horizons and my circles and those kind of things that I began to realize, okay, there's a whole big world out there that I haven't learned in, you
Mhm.
know, 12 years of school and 4 years of college. Like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm just at the beginning.
Mhm. Yeah. How much do you think you know now?
less than I knew then, probably.
Totally right. I was like, I feel the older I get, the more I'm like, I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't understand that. Like the older I get, the less I know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's every day you wake up and kind of just, huh, that's interesting. And so it's just, just being open to what
Mm,
the world's a big, cool place if you
yeah,
let it.
right.
It can be as small or as big as you want it to be. So,
Yeah.
why not let it
Well,
be
and
big?
that's so interesting because, like you said, it's not because how you had said, your community probably looked very much like you, right? Especially from a smaller town, a Christian school, and all of a sudden you're like, is that on purpose? Was that accidental? And it's like, it really doesn't matter because it is what it is until you have that awareness of like, what do I want my future world to look like? But like, what do you think if you don't think you would have stepped into an environment like ASA where you met all these diverse, people and you kind of, met people up close, what do you think your path would have continued to look like? Kind of hard to know,
Yeah,
but
it is. It's an intriguing question, and I I hope I would have gotten to the same place of
mm-hmm,
acceptance and
mm-hmm,
understanding shared experience that I've had. But I think it
mm-hmm,
would have taken me longer, and
yeah,
I would have had to have been a little more intentional about it.
mm-hmm,
And unfortunately, it probably would have taken some event like we've seen in the news
mm-hmm,
or something like that, some big event for me to get involved, or it would have
mm-hmm,
taken a more personal, maybe someone in my family coming out or someone,
mm-hmm.
a friend coming out, something like that. But it's allowed me to have conversations with people that I might not have got to have
Mm-hmm.
if I hadn't had
Yeah,
that experience.
yeah, and I mean, even this aside, like the experience that we all had working in that top place when we did, it's like everything's like intense, right? It's like everything's exacerbated just because the hours and the time and the job, and it's just I still think it's like I will forever be grateful for all of that, but it does just kind of accelerate everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, we had these pockets of work where the thing that you're working towards happens in such a tight time window, 2 or 3
Mm-hmm.
days, that you really don't have time to to be mad at the person next to you. I mean,
Right.
it's not going to do you any good. You're going to be stuck with them anyway for the next three
Yeah.
days, and there's going to be enough angry parents and fans to take care of it. You don't need your coworkers.
Were you there when the men's softball guy just made me cry? Were you there when that happened?
I I don't know that I was there.
Still so mad about that. It was like, 7 in the morning after you left at like 3 in the morning. And he was so mad about some scoring issues, some meathead. Again, my
Right.
judgment, right? I could give benefit of the doubt, but they really moved. And I just like cried and I was like crying because I was crying, I was like, stop crying. But
Uh,
anyways, that's a whole digression. But again, my judgment just came out, right? I was like some meathead, but kind of was a meathead.
Sometimes they act that way. So.
I kind of, well, I think, we talked a little bit in our pre-call about how everybody carries like a bias, a prejudice, a belief, right? That even you could have, the quote, most open liberal person, and they're going to have a lot of biases towards really conservative people, right? Like nobody is immune from the beliefs that we have, right? So how has that shifted for you as you know, focus maybe more on the shared experience, giving people the doubt? How has that shifted for you?
Yeah, I mean that's another big question.
Yeah.
So I think for me, um, it was realizing, especially because I've had the opportunity to travel to some other places in the world. We
Mm-hmm.
went to China to do some mission work in Africa and Panama and those different places, and you see even like with the our work there, you got these international teams that come in from China and the Republic of whatever and Russia and
Mm-hmm.
all that. And so they all come in and they're all playing the same sport, and we're doing our best to
Mm-hmm.
communicate, and we're trying to. And so for me, it was kind of the realization that in that moment, like at an international softball tournament, and we're working that, we're literally in that shared moment together.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not this metaphysical, metaphorical thing. Like we're all literally in the same place, even though we're from such different places.
Yeah.
and you look around and you start looking at everybody and you're like, like a lot of these people want the same thing I want in life. A lot of these people want relationship, they want happiness, they want a career that makes them fulfilled. They want to play a sport that they love, they want to work with people they like, and it's like, so are we really that different? When you really start peeling it back, we're literally, we've all of our different experiences have brought us to this same place. Are we really that? And so it's like, that was kind of a realization for me that was like, and we're kind of sharing this experience with other people. It's not my experience, it's our experience.
And like you said, from all over the world, all different socioeconomic, different, genders, different family roles, all that. And we're all here in the same moment. Yeah. It's interesting you say that too, because what kind of came to me is like, it's almost like, how do we focus on the values over the identity, right? Because I really struggle when people get really wrapped up in like their outer identity. Because I'm like, I don't want to be known just as X, just as Y, right? Like there's so much more to me than just like, oh, a lesbian who's a coach that lives in Texas. Like that doesn't matter. That doesn't like say who I am, right? So how do we focus on those values? Like you said, everybody wants trust, everybody wants relationships, everybody wants to be seen. And so like how that can shift a conversation, even if you're like very, very different on a topic of like race or abortion or gay marriage or religion or whatever, like how do you still find that common value of it?
I think a lot of times it starts with, and so my kids have this game and it's called Spot It, and there's a bunch of little round cards with different images on it, and you lay two of them down and you have to find every card, and I still am baffled by how it works every time. But every time you lay two cards out, there's something on them that matches. One picture on there, and it may be bigger, it may be smaller,
interesting.
But it's two pink socks, or it's two red glasses or something. But every time you flip two of them over, there's one piece that is similar on them. And I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing for us. That if we really look, and it may be the most mundane thing. We may both love chocolate ice cream. We may both hate chocolate. It may be something but when you make that connection point of there is a similarity between us, you often find more as you start to dig, and you find that sort of connection point where, okay, now we can connect on a human level and begin to have a conversation. And a lot of times I try and find out, what are people passionate about? What makes their eyes light up when they talk about it? And so if you can get people in that space, you can really learn a lot about them that way, and really find that commonality between you and them that allows for that connection on a better level.
It's almost like like a gateway drug, but in a good way, right? Like a gateway, like, all right, hey, we both like chocolate ice cream. Oh wait, we both like doing puzzles. Oh, that's interesting. Our favorite Hawaii. We love Hawaii. And it's like, I think we talked about, it's like, I think it was Michelle Obama's quote, right? Like, it's really hard to hate up close, right? It's really easy on paper to be like, that is somebody, there's no way I could, and it's still something I struggle with, to be honest. There's a lot of like topics or a lot of people who I'm just like, who I don't know that I would, but I know that if I really sat down and was open to it, I probably could find some common thread. And I think what is also interesting is like, you see these hot topics, right? Like the ones I kind of talked about, right? I would dare to say, if you took two super right wing, super left, pro-life, pro-choice, Black lives, blue lives, whatever that is, right? If you put them in the same room, they're so passionate, and it probably comes up to like the same type of value, right? They just look at it totally different, right? Like, or maybe not saying, but something that they could understand. Oh, I understand that your value is, diverse, whatever. I can't think of a way that, but like I can see that, because that's a value I have here.
Yeah. The funny thing is with those people, it's like, if they meet in the context of the thing that they absolutely disagree on, and that's the basis of their relationship. Like, and you see it all the time on talking shows where you got these hosts, and the whole point is, you're here, I'm here, and we're going to dig our heels in. But
we're not going to come here.
Yeah, but if you
Yeah.
step and look at like those people's day-to-day lives,
Yeah.
the, they will look oftentimes so very similar. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you drive to work, you go to the movies, you go out
Mm-hmm.
to eat, like, a red wine, or it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and you're so far on this one topic, and yet the rest of your lives looks very similar
Yeah.
to one another. Like there's surely not as big a gulf as
Yeah.
we think there is.
Right. Which is why I think identities can be a really slippery slope, right? Because it kind of puts like I think you had mentioned, I loved it. Like we didn't always bring our persona to the table, right? You didn't come in like blazing in, like, oh, I'm a pastoral, like whatever. Like we didn't lead with these dividers, right? We led with like, oh, this is who I am. It's part of my life, but there's like also this whole other part of my life
Yeah.
and your life that's like, oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly what it was. We didn't try. Well, we didn't try to be the stereotype, and we
Mm-hmm.
didn't try to be the spokesperson for our
Yeah.
sort of respective corners. We didn't try to pick up the mantle and
Right.
bring it to Lunch Bunch.
I didn't try to make you gay or anything.
um, and so it was, and it was, so that was kind of the thing, was we didn't
Mm-hmm.
pretend like we're the expert or we're the
Yeah.
spokesperson for this, or that's all that we are. That was the cool thing. Is like, that's not
Mm-hmm.
all I am. There's a lot
Yeah.
more to me than that one sort of
Mm-hmm.
aspect or one belief.
Yeah. Yeah. What else, what are you, what's is there like a group of people that you're just really curious about that you would love to ask some really uncomfortable, difficult questions? Or not
Yeah,
even uncomfortable, just like
yeah,
that you're really curious about that you're like, I don't have anybody in my life I'm curious about them.
yeah. There's tons of them, and that's like sort of how my brain works. Is like, man,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to, and I think it goes back to what we did. I would love to sit down with someone from that perspective and just have an honest conversation.
Mm-hmm.
To be like, to where I can say, hey, like, I see it this way,
Mm-hmm.
this is why,
Yeah.
and then rather than for that person. And I think that's part of the problem we have today, is that the person just comes back with, well, no, this and this, rather than, hey, here's my experience
Mm-hmm.
in this thing, here's why I'm where I'm at. And there's no willingness, like, we allowed each other to be who we
Yeah.
were, and
Mm-hmm.
we didn't try and force each other to convert or even believe what we believed, any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. There
And
was
so
no
I think,
motive behind it,
yeah, there was
right?
no motive
There was
other
no,
than
yeah.
curiosity, and the hope for that another conversation and another
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And so I think those, there's so many things that just
Yeah.
baffle these days.
Yeah.
Honestly, some of the Black Lives Matter stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to have conversations with people in that.
Yeah.
Some of the transgender stuff, I don't
Mm-hmm.
fully
Yeah.
understand it admittedly. I've never, again, it's some of those people that I've just never had experience on a personal
Mm-hmm.
level.
Yeah.
And so I really try and hold back some judgment on those things until
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, like you said, it's this community, that it's not a part of your world. And it sometimes can too feel disingenuous to be like, I'm going to go make friends with a Black person. I'm going to go
Right.
make friends with some transgender. You're like, that feels very tokenish. So you're like, how do you kind of put yourself in positions where, or maybe you do the opportunity when you meet somebody, you're like, hey, we do coffee, like, but I think sometimes it can feel like, so I have to go find like my token Native American friend. That feels very like not the way it's supposed to be also.
Yeah, and I
you
think,
know
I think when it happens like that, I think that's where, when you come at it from that angle, it's like, okay, I'm already putting you in that box,
yeah.
rather than, hey, I met this person at work, or I met this person at the
Mm-hmm.
bookstore, or when you
Mm-hmm.
meet someone in another context, you don't immediately put them in that box, because, like,
Mm-hmm.
even with you, and I was what, 20, early 20s, newly
Yeah.
married, hey, pretty young, early 20 girl, I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming, you know, thinks about the world the way that I do. Like, hey,
Yeah.
we should be, and then it's like, come to find out later on, like, hey, we're kind of different
Yeah.
than one another. And so it's like, well, let's explore that and see
Yeah.
how what's her world, what's her experience.
Yeah, you're like, well, yeah, that's interesting, right? It's like I think this probably happens a lot too. You find somebody, you meet them, you enjoy them, you like them. You know, we're not going to be best friends with everybody either, right? We don't have, these aren't conversations you have with every single person because that'd be really exhausting. But you meet somebody and then you find something out and you're like, oh, right? You're like, oh, I didn't know they were XYZ, or I didn't know they had this belief. And I think especially now it's so polarized with so many things that it's like, and that could have dropped, but that's not what we did. We're like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's I don't know anything about that, or I've been very like hurt by that piece, but I'm gonna like give him the benefit of the doubt and see what like happens. And I want to commend you because I never felt judged. I never felt like preached to, and you always were you led by example of what I would hope somebody would, even at a young age of 22. So I just want to commend you for that as well.
Well, I appreciate that because and that was always a concern of mine with
Yeah.
not only me, but other people in the office who I was different from, is like, I want these people to know that I value them.
Yeah.
So, I just tried my best to do that every day.
Yeah.
Some days were better than others.
Hey, we all have our days. Well, I think that's a great point too, is like, how do you, how can you still show up though honoring your faith, right? That is, that was a really big piece of who you were and it was really important to you. So like do that and not push on other people. And I think so often we don't see that we can do both, right? Like you can be a proud Christian, a proud gay person, a proud black woman. You can be this proud person and still provide space for other things. Because it's not like you hid who you were, right? You're not like, I don't want to make people uncomfortable. You're like, no, this is who I am. And like, I still want to know about you, which can be hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's again, what we've lost. And I don't fully understand why that's gone away.
Yeah.
But just like you described earlier, I think a lot of times now we meet somebody, we're interested in them, we find some commonality, then we find that one thing that we're like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And then we just cast them aside. And
right.
We're done with it. And it's like, we can't be friends because of this one thing. And it's like, really? There's all these other things that there's some matchup. I feel like the world would be bigger and better and brighter with lots of different people in it.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down as this, like, I think it's like identity politics, right? Like even when I was saying that, it's like, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, I'm Black Lives Matter, I'm pro-choice. Like that's like such a personal thing as opposed to like, I believe in XYZ, right? As opposed to like, I am. And I think we're really caught in that place, and present company included, right? Like I've gotten caught up and get like, because it feels more emotional, right? As opposed to like, it's part of my identity, not a belief that I have.
Right.
And some of the topics that people are passionate about are really personal. So it makes sense that we're doing that, but I think it's something to watch out for. And like I said, like talking to myself as well as sharing.
No, definitely. And I think the other thing is we've become, and I don't know if we've become more aware of the certain boxes and or have a better understanding, like conservative. I think we think, okay, conservative means this, or LGBTQ means this, and it's all these things that we're trying to check off. And it's like, for me, there's so much nuance, even within the groups. Like, you can have conservatives that are LGBTQ. You can have LGBT, like they can be both. It doesn't have to, fit this one mold. And it's like, okay, like we're on different ends of this one thing, but again, we agree on this other thing, and we like this other thing. It's just kind of, for me, trying to see the whole person. Like we have so much share, and you go back and you think about, like, we were all kids at one point. We were all, going to school, doing homework, all that kind of stuff. And so we have so much shared experience. For us to throw that all away is just, it's kind of tragic to me, really.
Yeah. And, the outcome may not be like a friendship like this, right? But it may just be like, oh, I learned more about I don't agree with that person per se, but also like, it doesn't matter if I agree. It's not I don't always get a room at the table to agree or disagree. Right. But I can understand maybe why somebody has this belief. Right. I'm like, I don't get it, but I can understand. And I love that nuance piece, right? Even how and I'm such a big definer, like how do you, in coaching, right? I'm like, I'll know when I'm successful. I'm like, well, what does success mean? And they're like, I have no idea. And I'm like, success for Eli is different than Holly, is different for every person, right? And so and then it's so funny you say that, because I was in a Uber in the East Coast like a month ago, and I was talking with this guy. He's like, it was like an hour drive, so like we're just chatty, and he's like, yeah, he's like, you'd be surprised. He's like, he said he picked up a guy in a rainbow colored MAGA hat, and he was just like so confused. But he was great. He's like, I just talked to the guy because he was like a gay man who was a big Trump supporter and his reasons. And he was like, I loved Uber. He was awesome. He was like, I didn't get it, but like, it was interesting. It's like, it's that nuance, right? It's that piece. And there's probably, outside of that, there's probably so many other things that are interesting about that guy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the piece, just being able to have that conversation and walk away from it at the end saying, I still don't get it. I still don't understand.
Right.
Like, still doesn't make any sense to me, but hey, cool.
Yeah. And like, you're just open to it, right? Like something you can, think of like the worst person on the planet that you think, like, could you sit and learn something from them? Probably. We're not having anything in common, but at least, maybe it's not even a commonality, but also just like you said, that shared experience, right? Like that we're having right now.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think there's, and this can go down a ton of different rabbit trails, but you kind of have to, like, there's certain things like mental illness stuff, like, dissociated, like we're talking about, regular people,
Yeah.
having conversations,
Right.
like
Yeah. Well, tell me, what do you think has been from that experience where we like kind of came together, open curiosity? What else do you think has changed let me rephrase that. Sorry. What did that kind of like set you up for the rest of your life up till this point? Like, what do you think is different?
Well, so all my life I was raised in church, grew up in church, went to Christian college, was kind of had a path set out towards ministry, of working in the church, and I was sort of on this insular path of my whole life is going to be spent within the confines of these Christian institutions, if you will. And I think when we do that, sometimes we spend enough time in there insulated, we lose the ability to connect genuinely with the world around us. And just because we don't use those muscles, we don't try to connect, we don't try to understand. We spend so much time trying to understand and interpret the world from that one perspective that we don't allow room for other people. And so I think that's sort of the path I was on. And this was that first sort of broadening of my world, if you will. And it just allowed me to create space for lots of different people. And so it's been really cool because it's sort of allowed me to interact with people who made different decisions than I did, who may have made some bad decisions, may have made some good decisions, may have made some Christian decisions along the way, or making non-Christian decisions. And it's still like, there's room for those people in my life. There's room for relationship. I think it's allowed me to have space to be vulnerable to, Kendra and I are foster parents now. I think it's helped us sort of prepare for that, space for that. At work, we deal with a lot of people that come from addiction and mental illness, and the justice system. And so, those people have walked a very different path than I have. I could do the same thing. I could come to them and judge them. And say, hey, you're a bad person. You're, whatever name you want to pick to call it. And say, you deserved it, this, that. Whereas, hey, it's like, no, now again, you're coming to work where I work, we're going to be colleagues. And now we have a common goal, like, we have a common goal to make this company successful. So let's start heading in that direction rather than worrying about where you came from.
Oh, it's interesting. And like you said, you can meet somebody like that is like, addiction, criminal background, whatever, and you can say, yes, I don't agree with what you did. And through that experience, be like, oh, but I could see if I was in your situation, how maybe things would have been different for me. Right. Because it's like you see somebody, you're like, oh, yeah, maybe if that was my life, because I think, from a life of privilege, and privilege is very relative, but I consider I have a life of privilege, you're like, oh, I could see where if I was like that, like, if that was my life circumstances, I would probably have made some decisions that weren't great.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And that's, having that empathy. And
Mm-hmm.
I think people need to exercise their empathy muscle a lot more. Having that empathy to kind of look at someone and step in their shoes and see the world from their perspective is huge. And the other thing we at work, we kind of talk about, and we use one of the parables, not to get too preachy, but
Yeah.
the prodigal son, where the son goes away and he's eating pig slop and he's in the pig pen. And so at work, we kind of say, if somebody's out of the pig pen, like if they've stepped out of the muck and the mess, and they're trying to do better, like we can come alongside and we can help them. But if they're straddling the fence or they're in the mud, like there's nothing we can do for them.
Yeah.
At that point, we can wait there. We can, and once they decide to come out of the pig pen, like we're there. We're ready to walk alongside them. But they kind of have to take that first step.
Yeah. 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 You can't want something for somebody more than they want it for themselves.
No, right. It's you just especially when it comes to things like addiction and those kind of things. It's really hard if someone doesn't want to leave that. A lot of times you're just going to enable them to do that if you help too much.
Right.
And it's horrible. It's horrible to watch, and it's horrible to know the path they're on. But to know that there's hope, then there's always hope. Is kind of what keeps us going.
Yeah, all of us, right? No matter where we're at. Right. Well, tell me maybe, what is something that you're, I'll give you two options. What is either something you questioned in your life, maybe went against the norm that kind of made a difference for you, or what is there something you're currently questioning in your life?
Yeah, so I kind of have to go back to that faith, question is such a big part of always has been, and I think everybody wrestles with this, is really in college, sort of junior year, kind of had to decide, was this going to be my faith, or was I just going to pick up somebody else's faith and walk with it? And so for me, it was kind of questioning my faith was one of the moments, because I really had to decide, okay, I've spent 3 years studying this. I'm on a path to make this my career. Do I really believe this? Like, do I really?
And you're already in it, right? You're like already in the middle of it.
Right. It's like, this is a bad time to say no.
You're like walking down the altar type of thing, right? You're like, oh, I should have said no a long time ago.
Right. I should have probably wrestled with this a little earlier.
A little way. That's all right.
Right. But that was huge, was really just kind of deciding. And I think that has helped me along the way as I've not shifted beliefs, but as I've sort of believed things about other things, is I've had that same question. Okay, do I really believe that, or am I picking up someone else's view? Am I taking on someone else's thoughts about that? Like, I need to think critically about this for myself before I take a real hard stand on this thing.
Yeah. So like when you started to question your faith a little, and that wrestling, like that's also that indicator for like, oh, what else am I like just absorbing through other things, and it's not my thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Which is like all of us. And I love that too, because like I think that's something that we need to be like, you can decide at any age to wrestle with something, right? It's not like you're like, I made a decision. It can like, it's this constant flux. But I love that even you allowed yourself, because a lot of people are like, well, this is what I decided. This is what I believe. I already paid my tuition. This is what's happening. I'm already in it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think people, I hope people have the courage to do that. I really do, because you see it all the time, and if they would question it and decide to go a different path, would they be happier? Would they be more fulfilled? You might make a mistake, but there's very fatal mistakes.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of us are more resilient than we give ourselves credit
Mm-hmm.
for, and we can bounce back from mistakes better than we think we can.
Yeah.
Now that gets harder when you've got people depending on you, like
Mm-hmm.
kids and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
spouse. So the stakes are raised a little bit, but definitely for young people, hey,
Yeah.
ask those questions.
Yeah. Right. And I'm curious, kind of my last question is a little top up. I'm curious, do you, because you 22 seminary, all this like past, like you're in it, your mission trips, you're like on paper, like exactly what like probably a good Christian pastor should look like, right? And now you're not that you're not, but like I'm curious, do you feel like your faith now as somebody is stronger than it was at 22 or 23?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I've got a lot more scars than I did at
Mm,
22.
yeah.
I was pretty, uh, I was pretty fresh and clean, and didn't have a ton of life experience.
Yeah.
We lost a classmate the beginning of our junior year. That was
Mm,
really kind of my first experience with any tragedy or loss or heartbreak, if you will.
yeah.
Um, since then, I've had lots of opportunities to interact with those feelings, um, and so
Just a sec. I'm going to write that down. Opportunity to interact with those feelings. I love that. Yeah.
yeah. And part of it is admitting. Part of it is for me, like I've got these scars from things that
Mm-hmm.
happened along
Yeah.
the way. And so I have the potential to be callous at times because of those scars.
Mm-hmm.
And there's pieces of me that have lost some sensation and some feeling because of those scars. Like
Yeah.
if you've got a scar, like you touch around it and it feels different than when you touch the scar. And that's part of who I am now.
Yeah.
And all along the way, my faith has sustained me. My faith has been critical to those things, and there's been so much truth through my faith that I've discovered, and so that's been really encouraging.
Yeah.
That hey, up and down, left and right, like there's some truth there that I've found that has been very powerful.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that too, because probably if you would have shown 22, 23-year-old Eli, this Eli, he'd be like, oh, but he's not doing it right. Right. There probably would have been some like judge. And now you're like, oh, but I'm like faithful as it could get, right? Like I'm real, not real life, adult life. Because when we're young, we don't know any better.
No, and that's the way it should be. Like, hey,
Yeah. Right.
I hope everyone comes out of college with very little tragedy, very little loss,
Mm-hmm.
eyes just bright and ready to attack the world, because we need those people.
Yeah.
Because as we get older and get kind of kicked around by the world,
Yeah.
we sometimes lose that luster, if you will.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me. This was another lunch brunch. We're gonna have to do another one with Julie. Julie's gonna be mad she didn't get invited, but we'll have her. She's our third party in our joke punchline.
Right.
But thank you for sharing. Thank you for being who you were 15, 16 years ago and who you are today. This was such a fun conversation for me.
Absolutely, and thanks for reaching out. That was
Yeah.
awesome. Honored by it, and I love our friendship. I do. It's one of the
Thank you.
highlights of my life.
I received that back at you. So thank you so much. Give Kendra and the kiddos my best, and I will talk to you soon.
Will do.